If you've recently been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or unclear, or maybe you're just too tired to care anymore, if you feel like you've been living on the sidelines watching other women chase their dreams while yours stays tucked away in a journal, or perhaps even hidden in the furthest corners of your heart, then stay tuned, because in today's episode, we're going to be talking about moving from living passively to reviving the passion that once inspired your dreams, and what it looks like to move from merely surviving into truly living. Welcome to Timeless Truths, the podcast where faith meets purpose and where we are reminded through biblical wisdom that it's never too late to become who God created you to be. And also where we explore the ideas that drive us, the choices that shape us, and the mindset shifts that can transform our lives. Now, just in case you're new to this podcast and we haven't met yet, I'm Carolina Sizemore. And in today's episode, we are going to explore a tension that we all experience at one point or another, whether in our work, our relationships, or in just how we live our day-to-day lives. It's the tension between a purpose-filled passion and a life lived in passivity. Now, don't worry, I'm going to define both of these for you. First of all, let me ask you something. When was the last time that you felt yourself truly motivated and on fire for something? Like really inspired, engaged, and invested with everything that's in you. Maybe it was a new creative project, maybe even a new relationship, or a cause that stirred something deep inside of you. Now, compare that with a time that you just went through the motions, went with the flow, floating along through life, just doing the bare minimum. Now, maybe you weren't actually miserable, but you weren't truly alive either. And this is what I'm talking about. This is the fine line between passion and passivity. And today we're going to unpack them both. We're going to talk about what provokes them and what prevents them. And also, what it's going to take to start fanning the flames to reignite that fire of passion for those God-given dreams that you once had. So here's the truth, beautiful dreamer. You were created with purpose and for a purpose. Not to shrink back and definitely not to settle. Not to give up and sit out on your own life because you were called to so much more. Don't forget, my favorite, Ephesians 2:10 reminds us, we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things that He planned for us to do so long ago. And what this means, it's that your dreams aren't random, and they're not too big, and they're not too late, because they've been assigned especially to you by God. Let that sink in. Now, how could we possibly settle for a passive life knowing this amazing truth? So this is where the tension comes in. So many of us are living far beneath that calling. Why? Because without intentionally pursuing passion, passivity just tends to creep in. One of the main reasons it can sneak in is simply because passivity isn't always obvious. It doesn't look like laziness because it's much deeper than that. Passivity is the default mode when our faith or our belief begins to fade, when our continuous effort seems pointless, when life becomes something that just starts to happen to us, when we begin living reactively instead of proactive lives. And sometimes passivity wears disguises like, I'm just going along with the flow, or let's just see what happens, or I don't want to cause waves. Do any of these sound familiar to you? And passivity can often sound like, I am just too busy right now, or I don't know where to start. Even like, I've tried this before and it didn't work out. So maybe I'm just not meant for that. Or the one that so many of us carry around with us like a security blanket, but we rarely verbalize. What if I fail? Underneath each of those thoughts or perceptions is fear, comparison, doubt, exhaustion, and sometimes even trauma. Sometimes passivity protects us from risk, from failure, or from responsibility. But unfortunately, over time, it also protects us from joy and from growth and from deep connection and possibly even our calling. Because passivity subtly convinces us to play it safe. But safety was never the goal, beautiful dreamer. Faith was. In fact, Hebrews 11:1 tells us, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Because even when you don't see the full picture, faith invites you to move forward and to take action. And that leads me to our timeless truth for today, which will move us from passivity into passion, which is obedience unlocks your purpose. This truth captures the core idea that waiting for perfect clarity or motivation is often a form of delay. And like I've heard so many times before, not to mention personally experienced, delayed obedience is disobedience. While the majority of the time obedience to God's nudges, even when you're unsure or afraid, is what eventually leads you into alignment with your true purpose. Because if you are willing and if you're obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. That's what Isaiah 1:19 tells us. And I could actually share so many stories of people that found their purpose and they were rewarded through their obedience, and vice versa. And this truth reminds us that passion doesn't always come first. Obedience does. And when we take those steps of faith, our passion is often rediscovered. It's refueled, it's refined, and even reborn. So let's talk about what this looks like, rekindling our passion. Seriously, what does passion actually look like for a woman of faith like you and I? Because passion isn't just about wild emotion or some dramatic, romanticized obsession like we've been led to believe through movies and books. While it is about an energetic feeling of sorts, it's more like the fuel that powers purpose. Because passion makes our efforts feel meaningful, even when they're hard. You know, passion is what gets artists and athletes out of the bed before the sun rises. And it's what makes entrepreneurs sometimes risk everything for their pursuit of a dream. And it's also what keeps ordinary people like you and me fighting for justice day after day and year after year, even when the odds coming against us seem impossible. We keep showing up. Now, passion often shows up when these three things align. Number one, your curiosity. When you care deeply enough to ask the hard questions. And number two, purpose. You feel, or better yet, you just know that it matters. And number three, ownership. You believe that it's yours personally to act upon. Now you may be thinking, Carolina, that looks a little bit like clarity. Yes, it does. But more than that, it looks like obedience. Now, passion isn't always loud or glamorous. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, sacred. It's choosing to get up early to write, to make the time to study, to apply for the thing that you've been afraid of, to say yes, even with trembling lips like we talked about last time. Now, Romans 12:11 encourages us to never be lacking in zeal, but to keep up your spiritual fervor while serving the Lord. And that word fervor, It's actually a holy fire. And God is calling you to tend that fire, not to bury it under excuses. Okay, now we're going to discuss some practical ways to shift from passive to passionate. So here are another 3 steps to help reignite your passion and to get you moving again towards your purpose. Number 1, name what you're dreaming about without feeling like you have to apologize for it or to explain it. Write down what you actually want. Put it in your journal. Don't write down what's practical or safe. Be honest, because God's not intimidated by your dreams. In fact, He's the one who probably planted them in your heart to begin with. Number 2, start now, even if you have to start small. Don't wait for perfect conditions or circumstances. You don't need to have all the answers to start. You just need to move in the direction of obedience. Remember, delayed obedience is disobedience. And number 3, invite God into the process. Prayer isn't just about asking. It's also about aligning yourself with God's purpose for your life. Ask Him, what's my next right step? And then trust that He is going to direct your path. He promises that in His Word. You know, I once read a book that really impacted my life. It was called The Tipping Point, and it was about the catalyst for change. So what would be the catalyst for a tipping point in your life right now? What would shift you from passive to passionate? Often it's just a moment or a choice, maybe even experiencing pain. A pain that says, this wasn't how I expected life to turn out, or I just can't live like this anymore. Or maybe even, I know deep down that I was created for more. But it doesn't always have to be a dramatic awakening. Sometimes it's as small as simply saying, what if I just tried something different? One step, one question, one change in the direction of your dream. So here's the truth. Passion doesn't always look like a roaring fire. Sometimes it's more like a flickering, whispering candle. And passivity, it isn't always still. Sometimes it looks like a busy blur of a life that's going nowhere. So how do we shift? Well, there's 3 questions that I'm going to challenge you to contemplate today, and I hope you write these down and seriously think about them. First of all, what are you tolerating that's draining you? Because passivity thrives where we allow what we don't want into our lives. Secondly, what did you once love that now you've buried? Because passion is often waiting underneath all of the dust and the cobwebs of our lives. And finally, I know you've probably heard this one before. What would you do if you believed that you couldn't fail? This question seriously often opens up the doorway to a totally reimagined life. Stop living in that timidity that we talked about in the last episode. Practice that confidence. And remember, start small. Just take action, even if it's messy, because passion grows through movement, not perfection. So here's a little takeaway. If passion is the fire, then passivity is the blurring fog. One illuminates and one conceals, but only one of them is going to illuminate the way. Remember, having passion doesn't mean that you have to be loud, obnoxious, or pushy. And you don't have to have it all figured out. But you do need to care. You need to care enough to move, enough to step out in faith, enough to walk forward towards your dream in obedience to God. Because remember, our timeless truth for today that will encourage us in moving from passivity to passion is obedience unlocks our purpose. This truth is what's going to lead you into alignment with your true purpose. Now, remember, I promised you last week that I'm going to bring a challenge, and I want you to follow through with these, beautiful dreamer. Let me know, because our challenge of this week is to take one step forward, one action, no matter how small, towards fanning the flame of your passion. And then, for a little extra accountability, share what you're doing with a friend or with me here in the comments. Because passion multiplies when it's spoken out loud and when it's shared. Now, a little closing encouragement. Beautiful dreamer, your life was never meant to be muted. Trust me, you were not created to simply exist. You were created to live fully, to love deeply, and to walk boldly in the calling that God placed on your life. So let today be the day that you stop waiting for that elusive clarity and you start moving forward in faith. Passion isn't about all the hype. It's about heaven-fueled purpose, and you just have to reach out and grab it. I want to personally thank you for taking this time to grow with me. I know your time is your most valuable commodity. And if this episode stirred something within you, if it inspired you in any way, please share it with a friend who needs this reminder too. And remember, you are not behind. You are just getting started. And whatever you do, please don't let your fire go out. You were created to shine as an example for everyone around you, and to realize that happily ever after isn't a lie.